Hi, and welcome back to the Lil Will Learning Company. Now, most kids can talk brilliantly, but then when it comes to writing, it becomes chaotic. And it's not that they're lazy, it's just that they haven't really been taught a skill progression. And if you skip that progression, then it leads to very scattered thinking when it comes to the writing process, and then eventually comes to very scaffolded or shallow work. And I hate writing all this. Now, there was a really dominant approach to writing that went through all public skills called Writer's Workshop by Lucy Calkins. And unfortunately, it did fail when put into a very large scale. And I'll explain why it failed at that large scale level. And instead, what to use is something that's more progression based, skill based, and taught explicitly over time. Writer's Workshop became very popular, not because teachers are foolish or they didn't know any better. It became popular for a reason. So I want to go over a few of those right now. So, first, it felt very humane. You had all these decades of these worksheet level grammar practices, uh, and it was like rote drills and daily drills. And here was this approach that basically said, let's give kids some creativity. Let's give kids some freedom in how they write. So it felt great. And for a new teacher coming into the profession, when you want students to love school and feel accomplished and feel successful, it really took off. The second reason is that when you have something like Writer's Workshop, you have to train teachers on how to use it correctly. And the framework for um, teacher development or professional development when it came to Writer's Workshop, it scaled really well for teachers. And you have conferences, you have these coaches, and all these things. It scaled really well, and now a district can have this full ELA approach to writing, and it's across the whole entire district. It made it much easier for them to implement these professional developments at that level. Thirdly, it was already lining up with many things that really skilled teachers were already doing. They're already putting in mini lessons. They're already putting in conferring with other students and giving that kind of pointed, direct feedback in a small group setting. So when you already know that there are skilled teachers implementing some of these practices, well, then it just makes sense to take that practice and put it into a large scale. The idea was that children will learn writing the same way that they've learned to speak if you immerse them in enough print or language. And if you have them practice over and over and over again, and then you work on their expression, well, then the skill of writing will just naturally occur over time. In a small setting, in a small group with a very skilled teacher, with very well behaved students, well, then yeah, that can work to an extent. You can create some students who are skilled writers. You can make some students whose writing actually progresses. So that's not the criticism here. The criticism is that when you scale that at a very large level, like with all public schools, that's where issues start to show up. So number one, just because a student has time on task of writing, that's not the same thing as skill progression. If you just took a student and you said, go write for 20 minutes, that's almost the equivalent of saying to a student, why don't you go outside and play basketball for 20 minutes? And then they come back and you're saying, hey, why isn't your jump shot good? It's not the same as focusing on a specific skill. And so, because of that, it doesn't explicitly teach writing. The second part that is an issue is it doesn't really explicitly teach the structure of sentences. So, like, research has shown that sentence combining is actually really, really beneficial in terms of like teaching how to write sentence structure and grammar and all of that. Individual like grammar worksheets have actually not shown to be all that effective. Essentially, the actual workshop model, because it doesn't really explicitly focus on sentence structure, and it's just a lot of it's just go right, that kind of falls apart. Which again, the third part, it the workshop model relies very heavily on teacher expertise. And we're talking teachers who can get a small group together, confer with them, give very direct and pointed feedback, and then tell them, okay, now and go work on this. Because in reality, if you have a class of like 25 to 30 students, you could only really work in this workshop model as a small group, let's say 5 students. So you say, hey, these 5 students, come over here and we'll look at your writing. And you're expecting the other 20 to 25 students to work silently on their own, writing over there, no interruptions, no behavior issues at all. That's fantasy land. Now, can some teachers pull it off? Of course. And can some teachers pull it off better than others? Absolutely. But again, on a large scale across many, many schools, many, many districts where behavior problems are an issue, where student focus is not as good as it can be, it starts to fall apart. Because if you get even just one interruption across those little mini group conferences where you're trying to get feedback, well, now all of a sudden that student doesn't have that feedback at all. And it you can imagine that, not just across one morning, but 180 days across a year. It's difficult to really replicate that. So, the things that actually work: explicit modeling and teaching. What we mean by that is teachers showing good writing and showing it out loud. Now, that might be used in a slight workshop model, but it's saying, like, here is an actual topic sentence. Here are my actual supporting sentences. Here are my transition words. And then saying to students, now we're going to work specifically just on your topic sentence right now. Okay, now we're going to work specifically on your transitions right now. It's not only just showing good examples, it's also partly showing some bad examples. So that way students can see, like, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Now, can you put this in a workshop model? Yes, some can do that and it does work. But again, the criticism is not that. It's when you put it at a very large scale with inexperienced teachers and things like that. So anyway, just showing the explicit modeling of here's how writing should go, that does work. The second thing is you need to give them actual strategies when working. So like an actual routine to plan out what they're going to do, an actual outline to utilize for what they will do in a paragraph, or how to look at how their sentence is structured, paragraph frames, revision checklists, a checklist to see, like, did I include everything I need to in this paragraph? Those really help students when you kind of give them that power to essentially, like, hey, here's what your writing should include. And it puts the accountability on them. But that, and also when they're done writing, they can go, oh yeah, check, I have that in there. We're good. Finally, as a teacher or a parent, you do have to give very focused feedback. Now, and I've been guilty of this. I've looked at a student's writing and I think I have 50 things I want this student to fix. But the truth is that writing is not easy to teach. And it is a skill where there's a bit of struggle to swim before an actual, butterfly stroke develops, so to speak. Now, what I mean is, if you're going to give the feedback as a teacher or parent, you got to pick 1 to 2 very, very focused things. For example, you say your topic sentence is way too broad. What we need to do is we need to really focus on sharpening your topic sentence here so that we as the reader know exactly what you want us to focus on. Or you can say, look, this paragraph here, you're missing transitions in these areas. You pick 1 or 2 things to really, really focus on. That helps a lot. If just writing doesn't work and we know explicit instruction does, what's the best framework to use to teach writing? Think of writing as going in 5 phases. You have sentences, you have paragraphs, you have essays, you have revision and adding style to your writing, and then finally, the 5th phase, which is advanced writing. Focus on sentences first in phase 1. Writing complete sentences, expanding out those sentences, combining sentences together, having syntax control. We've all had students who have run-on sentences, but remember, a sentence is just one focused, complete thought. And so always start with that. And I think many teachers and parents can relate. When students are struggling with writing in their later years, let's say around 10, 11, 12, maybe through middle school and high school, A lot of it could just be fixing their individual sentences at first. They tend to be too run on and too long, too many ideas. Second phase of writing is focusing on paragraphs. Give a topic sentence. Give evidence. Have good, clean transitions. Have a concluding sentence. Sentences that are structured, they give good explanation and they're clear. And every single paragraph has a clear, direct focus. And it's like the example I always used to joke with students where I said, hey, your sentence or your paragraph can be anywhere from 2 sentences to 2,000. And I try to remind them and said, what's more important is what's the point of your paragraph? What is its focus? Hence why you have a topic sentence. That's why you give evidence to support it. And then we use transitions to make the writing easier to read. So once you have sentences down, then we just focus on the paragraph part. The third phase of writing is then essays. And we all had to eventually write essays. But what do we mean by writing essays in this particular phase? Multiple paragraph structure, an introduction, supporting paragraphs, a concluding paragraph. Do you argue in this essay? Is it an argumentative essay? Is it an informative essay? So the type of essays that are being written. Is it a narrative type of writing? Are you writing a personal story? Are you writing a fictional story? And the big thing from this essay phase of writing is it starts to expand. Like writing now has a purpose. So if you are trying to persuade someone, if you're trying to inform someone, or you're trying to tell a story, writing now has a purpose. It's almost explaining to someone else. Fourth phase is when you start to have revisions in your writing and you add style to your writing. So this is where writing starts to stand out and become distinct. So this is where with your writing, you have clarity, you have precision. You start removing all the extra fluff that is unnecessary in the writing. And this is where you start to even tweak the sentences so that it has a rhythm to it. Revising or revision is a very important skill that is learned. And when we teach it through writing, it is something that even we as adults, we look at something, we look at the first iteration of something we create, but then we start to revise it down. Whenever someone makes a movie, or I mean, I'm making, I guess, something right now, but even when you make a movie or a video, you eventually edit it and revise it. And this skill is taught in writing. Again, that's where we start to see that type of writing style that each individual author brings. It is formulated in this phase here. And the big takeaway in this phase, here's where the writing starts to take on meaning. So we can look at surface level errors such as capitalization or not putting a period correctly or punctuation correctly or maybe a run-on sentence. But now we look at the big picture of like here's the meaning or the theme behind this writing here. Now, finally, the fifth phase is advanced writing. This is where we start to have analysis and a literary response to the reading itself, research, and then rhetoric as well. And this is when you start to get into writing at like high school and university level, but it's very content dependent and discipline specific, but it needs those first phases of writing underneath it to support it. In other words, you can't really analyze something unless you understand it. But once you analyze it to communicate the most clearly to others, you need the other 4 phases of writing to really get your idea across. Because ultimately, all writing really comes down to is I'm expressing my understanding, my opinion, my thoughts to someone else in as cleanly and efficiently as possible. Writing is communicating. It's not just expressing yourself. There is a structure that needs to be followed. It's a ladder, sentences, then paragraphs, then essays. Then we start to add in revision and style, and then eventually just to advanced thinking. And it's built step by step. And again, I don't want to keep dunking on Lucy Calkins and the writer's workshop model. It was effective to an extent, but then it just showed at a very large scale, it just didn't transfer very well. Whereas these others, the 5 phases of writing, along with very explicit instruction, that does scale very well. Well, I hope this video was informative and helpful. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.